Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Stoli, Doli, Scaries. I'm your host, Kyryn.
I'm your host, John Ritchie Jr., and this is our very special guest, my lovely sister, Darrah.
Yeah.
Welcome. Welcome to the
Nice.
So
pod.
happy to have
here.
you. The perfect first guest. Absolutely. And today is even more special because we're watching the best 90s flick, Scream.
Someone's taken their love of horror movies one step too far.
Accurate. Quite accurate. And Darrah, we're so excited to have you because you were a teenager when this came out and you actually saw it in theaters. You're special.
Yes. I saw it when I was 17 years old. It came out in December of 96. I was a junior in high school and I saw it in the theater. So I was like probably the same age as they were in the movie. And it was, not to be dramatic, but life-changing. It was amazing. It was one of those things that kind of changed the game, right? For the horror movie industry. That's what was so cool about it. It was something totally different and very meta and very well written. And talk about stars. I mean, as I was rewatching, just what a cast.
Mhm.
Everyone like at the highest level, doing their best work.
Absolutely. Today's cocktail is going to be the Woodsboro Slasher, a delightful mix of gin, ginger beer, and cranberry. You can find the entire recipe and ingredients list on our Instagram page at Stoli Doli Scaries, and we will be taking a sip anytime the phone rings. So, bottoms up. So, Scream was released in theaters December 20th, 1996, directed by Wes Craven, starring Neve Campbell, Skeet Ulrich, Courtney Cox, David Arquette, Matthew Lillard, Rose McGowan, Jamie Kennedy, and Drew Barrymore. And it starts out, iconic scene, Casey Becker, played by Drew Barrymore. It's a phone call. Ring, ring. It's the wrong number. She's very kind to this person. She's like, oh, okay, no problem. Take it easy. But then he calls right back and she's like, why'd you call back? And he says, oh, to apologize. You seem nice. And she's like, no. She's still very nice, but she dismisses it and she hangs up. He calls back a third time. This time, she's a little annoyed, but for some reason, she sticks it out, stays on the line with him. I think Casey is lonely. And they start talking about horror movies and what's her favorite horror movie? Do you have a boyfriend? She walks into the living room and he asks, what's your name? And she says, why do you want to know my name? And he says, because I want to know who I'm looking at. Uh-oh. That's shit gets real for Casey. Flirtation comes to a halt. She hangs up. Like, it freaks her out for sure. And why shouldn't it? She's in a house with literally no curtains. There is nothing shielding her from the outside world.
I'm trying to think. There are only, so many iconic scenes in movie history, right? And of all of the scenes in this movie, this one is it, right? This defines the franchise. This is it. And I think what was so groundbreaking about it was we had no frame of reference going into it. We thought Drew Barrymore was the star of the movie. She was on the poster, right? Like, isn't she on the poster? That's her face.
Yeah.
And the most famous person in the movie doesn't get killed in the first scene. So, you're not expecting it. So it totally just, at that point, you knew that this movie was going to be amazing. It was super gory. Those windows like still haunt my dreams. Like all those windows. I'm like, she can't be covered anywhere. Like she's so unprotected right now. And then the like prank call kind of trope, right? Because we've seen like, right, there have been movies in the past where like a stranger calls, or there's a call, like the phone had been used before
Mhm.
as a sort of medium in horror, but like this just took it to a totally different level and a different place. And when he starts, like when the mask comes down and he's like flirty, and then he says, "Don't hang up on me," and he screams at her and then tells her he wants to gut her like a fish. It was like, ah,
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah. Super duper wild. Johnny, do you already have this fun fact about Drew Barrymore's wig?
I do not. Please tell.
So she specifically picked out this wig because she wanted to look like Michelle Pfeiffer in Scarface. So she gave a picture of her to the wig designer, and they specifically, because I always thought that was weird. I was like, that's such a interesting choice to make. I never knew why they wouldn't just use her real hair. Like it's an odd wig, but she specifically wanted to look like Michelle Pfeiffer in Scarface.
And you know what? It works. Really stands out,
Never
as
forget it.
evidenced by your
Never never
look
forget it
tonight.
for
Yeah.
sure. So he makes that comment. She gets all nervous. She hangs up on him. She, for some unknown reason, he calls again and she picks up. And I'm like, yo, Casey, why are we picking up? We know he's a weirdo. We know but she picks it up and she says, "Listen, asshole." And he says, "No, you listen, you little bitch. You hang up again, I'm gonna get you like a fish." And then he goes, "Ah, yeah." And I was like, such a quick, like, who, like, that was such a quick turn on, because you're right. He was kind of suave. He had a very nice, like, deep voice. I don't know. Maybe I would have answered too. So that happens, and she's like, "What? My boyfriend's coming, and he's big, and he'll kick your ass." And even though she totally, poor Steve, denied his existence just moments ago, but now he's coming, and he'll kick your ass. And he says, "Oh, his name wouldn't happen to be Steve, would it? Check the push." And there's old Steve wrapped up,
So
and he's been
the
abducted.
line is, "Turn on the patio lights again." I was like, ah.
He's having fun with it. He's having fun. She turns on the patio lights, and there's poor Steve, and he's tied up with, duct tape around his mouth, and he's already been like a little bit messed up. They've done some shit to him. And Drew goes to open the door. He's like, "Oh, don't you do that. We're going to play a game, and we're going to, I'm going to ask you some questions about horror films. And if you get them right, then, Steve will live. And if not, uh-oh." And poor Casey, he asked her a trick question. He asked her the killer in Friday the 13th, and she says Jason, which most normal people would, but that ain't it. He's talking about Pamela Voorhees, and old Steve gets their heave-ho. She decides to try to get the fuck out of Dodge at this point. And so she gets out of the house, and she sees her parents coming up the driveway, and for some reason she fucking stops. And Ghostface comes and stabs her right there and hangs her on a fucking tree. I don't know how he had the time to do that or the strength, but they do. It's very sad. Her parents find her. It's a real bummer for Drew, and that's it.
I also forgot about the fact that they hear her on the phone. Like she picks up the phone to call 911, and she can hear her like taking her last breaths. And then he
Yeah.
says, "Go call the neighbors. Go to the neighbors and call 911." And then she comes out and she's strung up. I mean, talk about an explosive beginning.
And
Wow.
those were such good
I have
parents. Those poor, like, for the 2 minutes that they were in the film, I totally believed their grief. That was fucking sad.
one. I feel like if we're in this game of answering the phone, right? If it got to a certain point where I was just like, if this were me at home, I think I would have probably crawled to the darkest part of my house, locked the door behind me, and like figured out some coverage or something. I don't know if I would have been as brazen or kept like, but there's the dynamics between them is so like push and pull that they're both getting frustrated about what the other is doing. And I was really thinking about how what Casey Becker embodied was a lot of um the audience, because in a slasher film where like, I mean, I was rooting for her from the beginning, and normally I'm just like, oh, another, stupid person ready to like trip over something, and so you're playing those like out in your head. When the moment they started having the conversation, you got to know her, I was like, I kind of like her. I think she's a little bit naive, but a little bit, um, has some balls, and like is talking with this guy, and like every time she's so hopeful, and he keeps tearing away parts of the hope. Like she's like, I'm gonna call the police right now, and he's like, oh, they'll never make it. We're out in the middle of nowhere.
Classic gaslighter, man, you know?
This fucker.
So Casey's dead. It's sad. That was quick. Then we meet Sydney Sydney Prescott, who's Nev Campbell. And she's in her bedroom typing away on her computer when her hottie hot boyfriend hot boyfriend, Mr. Billy Loomis, played by Skeet Ulrich, sneaks through her bedroom window. Her little rendezvous. We get some banter between them, and then Billy says, perhaps my favorite line in all of cinema. I was home watching television. The Exorcist was on. It got me thinking of you. That's what every lady wants to hear.
Wants to hear.
He goes on to suavely say, it was edited for TV, and it's kind of like us, Basically, this is his way of saying Sydney's not putting out, and he's pretty butthurt about it. But somehow, Sydney doesn't kick him out of her bedroom, and she decides, oh, okay, let's make out. Let's do like a PG-13 thing. So they have a little kissy kiss to the best cover ever, Don't Fear the Reaper by Gus Black.
I was trying to remember, was Skeet Ulrich, like, was this his first big movie, or had we seen him in something before?
So he'd done The Craft right
Well,
before this, I think.
I think The Craft was 94 and this was 96
Okay.
with the same two. I mean, they were both in that.
Well, and I read that Nev
Yeah,
Campbell
true.
was like very hesitant to do this, but then she found out he was doing it, and she was like, okay. Like, I think she had such a positive experience with him after The Craft that she wanted to do it because he was in it.
I love that. So he is less known though than her. I mean, she's kind of like in her 90s heyday. And it kind of sets up a lot of things, I think, in this scene. One, that she has sex issues, right? And we're gonna find out why. But they're laying the groundwork for that. It also sets up that the dad's going out of town, right? Dad's leaving. He'll be at the Hilton by the airport, and call him if you need him. See you later. I'm going for the weekend. And then also he's talking about scary movies. I mean, he's telling us who he is the whole time, right? Like, if you watch, there's all these references of him having knowledge of scary movies. And he's got a classic bad boy vibe, but that you're sure at this point you're supposed to think like it could be him, but that it's must certainly not be him, right? Like, it's too obvious or something. So it's kind of like laying a lot of groundwork there for what's to come, which was great.
I think that talking about, we started at an R rating, and then we were well on our way to an NC-17, and her playing off of that with this raw footage bit, I was like, girl. But I'll tell you my problem with this. One, you already know I'm not a Skeet dreamer. I'm not a believer in old Skeet. I do.
Not
I
your
think
time.
you know what? It may be an unpopular opinion. I'm gonna tell you later who I really think is the hot. But the problem that I have with this is Skeet's hair. What
It's
is this?
greasy. Oh,
It was a classic 90s look. So I can speak to this because I lived it, but it was a classic kind of like long greaser skater vibe, like greasy skater vibe, that was the thing.
greasy.
You'll see Jordan Catalano in My So-Called Life. You know what I mean? Like,
It's
Yeah.
like it's so pointed in the it's just like that on his head. Didn't make any sense for me, but
It's bad boy. Bad boys don't wash their hair.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So the next day at school, the news media descends on the town because of Casey and Steve's murder. We get to see old Gail Weathers for the first time, which is played by Courtney Cox, in her fabulous, and I do mean fabulous, lime green suit. If I could have found that, that's who I would have been. It is like magic. Sydney pulls up. She doesn't know what's happening. Her good friend Tatum lets her know, Casey and Steve were gutted. It was a bloodbath. It was bad. Police descends on the school and they interview each student just to kind of get a play-by-play of how well they knew Casey, how well they knew Steve. Do you have any idea who would do this? And we find out that Sydney's mom was raped and murdered like almost to the day of a year ago. And we get to meet Mr. Dewey Riley, played by David Arquette, who also happens to be Tatum's brother, who works for the police, and he's going to be very important in this franchise later on.
We get the intro to the whole like supporting cast. So you get Matthew Lillard as Stu. You get Randy, Jamie Kennedy as Randy. Henry Winkler was the principal. Totally forgot about that icon. Yeah, you get to David Arquette and Rose McGowan and Courtney Cox, which likely is probably outside of Drew Barrymore the most famous person on the cast because she's in her friend's heyday. So that was like probably a big draw for a lot of people and kind of like very off or like out of character for like where she lived as Monica in Friends. So I like her character to me is like absolute perfection. The other thing that I thought was great, and you start to see it here, is there's humor in this movie and like a lot of really good funny one-liners and levity compliments of like Rose McGowan and Courtney Cox and Matthew Lillard, who was like a star in this movie. I mean, he was like a standout star. I remember that like watching it especially you see it in like the last scenes, but he was so good and went on to have like a very successful career after this for a long time. I'm pretty sure he's got more money than God with that Scooby-Doo voice. So like he's done every Scooby-Doo since 1996. But anyway, just like a cast firing at all cylinders, like at various levels of popularity, but like just all perfect in the roles that they were in.
Yeah, for sure. His comedic
I will
timing, Matthew
say
Lillard is just like unbelievable.
I do have a crush on Matthew Lillard, but the one, and we didn't even talk about him yet.
Henry Winkler? I know.
No.
Me too.
The Fonz? I was totally sold with the Fonz. No.
Yeah, no.
No. For me, is it Lib or Liv Schreiber as Cotton Weary?
You don't see him in this movie.
We get some glimpses of Mr. Cotton.
And he is very handsome. I agree.
Yes, Cotton Weary is super hot. Had he been in this movie in any real way, he would have been the hottest person in the movie for sure. Also, little known fact, he is the narrator of Hard Knocks. If anyone watches that on HBO, the behind the scenes football show, they featured the Jets this year, and he's the voice. And even when I know he's the voice, I still can't hear him as the voice. And he paid a visit to the Jets this season in an also very meta moment. So he's still killing it.
He is daddy for now. From now on.
That's fair.
That was really unexpected. I think I would honestly, Henry Winkler would more expect. He's a glimpse. It's like he like comes on when he's watching the TV. Like he is like in his like orange jumpsuit.
Mr. Winkler is like Gramps.
He's a dad.
Leave is daddy.
Granddaddy.
Leave.
Poor Fonz. So they pull all the students into a room to interview them about Casey and Steve and kind of ask them what they know. We find out Sydney's mom was killed. And then we get this great scene by the fountain. All of the kids are talking about the murders. We get Stu, Tatum, my babe Billy, and Randy. And I feel like this is the first glimpse we get of like unhinged Stu. It's very weird in this scene. Like Sydney makes a comment like, how do you gut somebody? Like, how could you do that? And he says, you take a knife and you slit him from sternum to like, he's very unlikable. Maybe this is why I can't understand why you have a crush on him. He's so shitty.
I think you get a sense of how like relaxed they are together. They're trying to show you like they're all really good friends and also give you a sense of like, well, it's definitely not Billy. You know what I mean? Like it's not,
Right.
it couldn't possibly be any of these people because they're all such good friends. So maybe trying to lull you into a false sense of
Security.
safety. Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's also noteworthy to say that we have, two couples. Clearly, we already saw Sydney and Billy doing some on top of the clothes type stuff, and we get to see really Tatum and Stu at their finest, witty banter. I think Jamie Kennedy gives a sort of comic relief that is like, oh, I know who he is. He's the nerd. He's gonna, give us like, he works at the movie store.
Yes, and I think you're also pretty clear after this scene that Tatum and Stu are knocking boots, to use a phrase from the 90s. So, that could put them in a somewhat vulnerable position later in the movie. Because as we know, virgins always stay alive longer. So
They have this fun scene, and then we get Sydney. She's back at home. She's watching the news. We get a good little snippet of old Cotton.
I just have to say, we get John's snippet of Cotton Weary. So this is where John paused the movie. But she calls Tatum, her friend, which is anyone's not clear. These braids are an homage to Tatum. What an icon she was. But she calls Tatum and says, I just feel like a little unsettled. I'm in this big house by myself. My dad's gone and someone was just gutted up the street. So could you stay at my house tonight? And Tatum's like, absolutely. And then she's starting to watch the coverage of Gail covering the story. That's where we learn her mother, a little bit of the backstory with the mother and Cotton Weary. And then she inexplicably falls asleep. Who falls asleep? I would be like this by the door with a knife, just like waiting. Like, what? She falls asleep, takes a nap, wakes up, it's dark out? What are you? It must be nice to just be able to nod off, under extreme stress. But
And honestly, I was thinking that she's young enough to ride the bus.
Literally, the only note I have is, why is Sydney riding the bus? She's a senior in high school. What's going on? Waves goodbye to the bus driver. I was like, this seems off.
Because they're clearly all rich. I mean, they live in ridiculous houses in seemingly like Northern California, like wine country. So why they don't have cars? Like, why doesn't she have a car?
Yeah, it's a great question. That house is and it's overlooking the mountain. Stunning.
Mhm.
It's all these kids. What the hell's happening in California? It's beautiful. They're living the life. So, Sarah pointed out, she's watching the news. She falls asleep. Ain't got no worries. Ain't got no troubles. She's
Not a care in the world.
She is awoken by Tatum calling her like, hey, sorry, practice ran late. I think I'm gonna stop by the video store. What are you thinking, Tom Cruise? Like, everybody is so cavalier. I'm like, people are a woman was gutted and hung up by a tree. Like,
And
it's
all
crazy.
Tatum cares about is if you pause the movie at the right spot, you can see Tom Cruise's junk. What a queen. What an icon, Tatum.
What a life. What a life to live.
They had the only type of self-centeredness that you can have when you're a teenager. So
100%. 100%. So Sydney's like, "Oh, whatever, just fucking hurry." And she hangs up, and then right away she gets a call. And we know it's Ghostface. We recognize that voice. But she don't know that. She thinks it's Randy playing a funny joke. Who the fuck would play that kind of joke? I don't know. But she's, again, convinced that nothing could hurt her, and she thinks he's joking. And, oh, I like that sexy thing you do with your voice, Randy. Oh. So she's talking to him, and she's kind of taunting him because she thinks it's Randy. And she's like, "Oh, okay. Like, where are you at?" She goes onto the porch. She's like, "Well, if you're here, what am I doing?" And she picks her nose, and she just thinks nothing of it. And she's like, "Okay, Randy, that's enough now. Okay, bye." And Ghosty don't like that. And he says, "If you hang up on me, you'll die just like your mother." And Sydney realizes pretty quick, this ain't a joke. She freaks out. Finally, she runs inside, and who should pop out of the closet but Ghostface? They have a little tete-a-tete, a little fight in the hallway before she runs up the stairs away from him. She shuts the door, locks him out, and dials 911 on her PC. Who the fuck knew you could do that? And he runs away. And out of nowhere, old Billy pops through the window. "I heard screaming." And she's like, "Oh, I was so scared." And they hug, and a cell phone plops out of his cell phone plops out of his pocket. And she immediately thinks he's the killer. She immediately is like, "Oh, what?" And she runs away from him. And he's like, "Sid, what?" And to his credit, I don't know why she thinks he's the killer right away because of a cell phone. Is that just me?
I think Sydney. Now, a couple of questions with the cell phone. Like, did Billy always have a cell phone? Did he just get a cell phone? He tells the police later, everyone's got one of them these days. I can tell you that in 1997, people did not have them. In
See,
high
that was
school,
one of my questions. Question for Darrah. Was it normal for people in 1996? I think not,
I
but
am here as your historian to tell you, no, they did not. I got mine when I was a sophomore in college. So like 3 years later. And that's like when people were starting to get them. Nobody had them in high school, not one person. Sometimes people had car phones. Nobody had a cell phone. So I was like, did he just get the phone? And that's why she was like, what is that? Like, you have a cell phone now? And so that could have like thrown her off. But I also was like, you know what? Good for you, Sid, for being like, I'm going to trust my gut on this one. And something's off. Like, why are you here? And like, where did he go? And now you have a phone fall out of your pocket. And I truly forgot he got arrested. Like, and I was like, whoa.
just
Like
like
what
that.
a twist.
I think that what I learned, at least from Sydney's character, is she's got fucking balls. This bitch,
What? Big ones.
first of all, said, and it's so meta that we're on the phone, we're talking about it, and he says something like, "Oh, what's your favorite scary movie?" And she's like, "You know I don't watch that fucking shit. It's always some stupid big-breasted bimbo who's running up the stairs when she should be going out the front door and all this stuff." And I'm like, bitch, show me that you're gonna run up the stairs later, because she does. But what I will say is that Nev in this scene is giving a lot of who her character is, but also the acting is so good. It is very interesting that she immediately is like, something's wrong with the cell phone. It's a wild.
And I think, like, look, I've seen Scary Movie way too many times, and it is ruined this movie for me because all I can think of is that scene in Scary Movie where he crawls through the window and the like ghost face mask plops out and the stuff And so I'm like, of course. But like in this scene, like it's very little for her to go off to think like it's you. And so maybe it's a gut thing, which good for Sydney. Like, and if he didn't have it before, it would be suspicious. But it was just like, you know what? Their relationship wasn't that strong. If
You know what?
she could go straight to that after like, I don't know how long they've been dating, but I feel like it's been at least a year for her to be like, it's you. It's like, y'all have some problems.
Yes. And also we see her ignore her gut later in a very pivotal scene. And we see where that gets her. So the moral of the story is, ladies, trust your gut, you know?
So that happens. Bill gets arrested. Suck to suck. And Tatum pulls up just in time. Good job. What the fuck? In her little bug. She pulls.
It's a movie, guys. All right.
She had to get the dick flick.
Got her priorities. She pulls up. She picks up Sydney, and the whole time Billy is in the car. Sydney, you know me. Sydney, you know me. And Gail pulls up to try to interview them. It's kind of a wild scene. They whisk Sydney away to the police station where they're questioning Billy, and then we kind of find out that they're not able to locate her dad. It's going to be pretty pivotal. They called the Hilton. He's not there.
He's not at the Hilton by the airport.
No.
He is not there.
He's not at the Hilton by the airport.
This is where we get the full Gail experience too, after this police station scene, where you really get her character development, because you're like, okay, we don't like her. We're not supposed to like her. Why are we not supposed to like her? And then you kind of get the whole backstory that she's writing the book about the Woodsboro murders of Sydney's mom, and that she believes that Cotton Weary was wrongly accused. Your boy, Cotton Weary, was wrongly accused of the murder. And then she punches Gail in the face. So we get the full Gail experience. Gail is a, super ambitious, cutthroat, will stop at anything reporter to get the story, but also seems smart, and also makes a good case where you're like, maybe she's right.
And I think it's noteworthy to say that from the arresting of Billy, we really get a lot of Dewey in there, who simultaneously with Gail is also this young upstart. If we're going to go back to Christmas Eve, listen, he is 25 years old, we figure out. He is a man of the law.
And by the way, can I get a fact check on how old David Arquette really was in this movie? He won 25.
He was probably like 36 or something.
At least, right?
At least.
And I'm sure everyone knows this, but like, this is where the two of them met and fell in love. Yes, like this is where, and then they would go on to get married. So you kind of see like their chemistry right out of the gate. And their contrast of each other was so perfect.
I just think it's so interesting that like
you have 25. Your fact checker is here. He was 25 years old when he did this movie.
No way.
Yeah. He's a little baby.
How old is Neb Campbell?
It's a good follow-up question. Let's see.
We're getting all the juicy deets.
25. Right off he does look really young. I think she was even younger. I think she was 20. So she's 50 now.
God bless.
So I think she was 22.
So not far off. They were playing their characters in a slightly more elevated way.
Okay. So they're at the station. She punches Gail. She goes back to Tatum's house, and they're talking. Sydney gets a phone call. She goes to take it, and who should it be but old Ghosty? Poor Billy boyfriend. An innocent guy doesn't stand a chance against you. Looks like you fingered the wrong guy again. Yeah. Johnny, you should really be doing this in your ghost. Your Ghostface.
Honestly, shout out to the actor who did the voice of Ghostface. Insane icon.
Mhm.
Um, so many special moments with him. This scene is so cool in the fact that, you know, Sydney goes back to Tatum's. We get a little bit of the girlies talking with each other.
Once again, seemingly not having a care in the world. But I love Tatum because she's just like your fun time gal. And she's like, yeah, like you almost got killed tonight, but like, anyway, let's talk about your boyfriend. And, like, she's just like, let's just have fun. It'll be
Yeah,
fine. Everything will be great. We should probably have a party. And you're like, okay.
right. I I really love that about Tatum. I'm obsessed with Rose McGowan. But what I was gonna say is, as an audience, we learned that the killer with Casey and Steve is also the same person who killed Sydney's mom, in a way, because he said you're gonna die just like your mother, and he makes poignant references to where it's like, okay. And I feel like that scene on the porch with Sydney is when we realize, like, oh, who is this person?
Mhm.
And it's the first time, and this is why I love it too, is because it's not just a horror movie, it's a whodunit. It is a mystery,
Big time.
you know? And
Yep.
so as I'm trying to figure out who it is the entire time, so I'm hanging on every word everybody's saying. I'm trying to look for clues. I'm like,
Yeah.
I got my radar up.
Yep.
I think that's why this franchise survives forever, because you could do a million sequels and somebody will always go see it, because it's not that Halloween isn't great. You know what? I love me some Halloween, but we always know Michael Myers is behind the door. We always know who the bad boy is. And
Sure.
this is like Scooby-Doo. It's like you never know who it is. And it's always interesting. I'm always going to show up. And it's fun.
It all comes back to Scooby Doo, Matthew Lillard, and also Velma, who has an also iconic Bob, as you know. So, really,
Truth be told.
really, it all
Full
comes back to
circle.
Scooby.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Zoinks!
Scoobs. So she gets that phone call. She's like, oh, maybe I was wrong. Obviously. And then the next morning it's confirmed. Dewey says, you know what? We checked Billy's phone records. He didn't make those calls. They're in school the next day. Sydney is talking to Tatum and Stu in the hallway at their lockers. And as they're talking, these kids are running up and down the hallway in these ghost face costumes. And I'm like, what? Who raised these children? That would never happen. Who?
And don't tell me that when you're walking around on Halloween and you see someone in that mask, you're not a little scared.
A little bit. So these
It's
kids are running
meta.
up and down the hallway in their ghost face masks, not a care in the world. Sydney is very upset by this. I wonder why. She goes to run away. She runs right into Billy. They have a little chat. She apologizes for putting him in jail. And for some reason, he once again brings up the fact that she won't have sex with him. And I'm just like, dog, get over it.
Read
And
the room. Read the room, Billy. Read the room. Now's not the time. Okay.
there's bigger things going on here, Billy. And she kind of tries to defend herself.
Is your brain leaking? My mom was killed. I can't believe you're bringing this up.
Well, I think it's time you got over that. I mean, when my mom left my dad, I accepted it. It's the way it is.
Very, very, very pivotal line there, right? When my
Different.
mom left, I got over it. Did you? Did you?
No, you didn't. Really, I think later on we found out you didn't get over it. Not at all. Very much the opposite. So he says, I think it's time you got over that. But you're still worried about that? You're still harping on that? And she says, I'm sorry if my traumatized life is an inconvenience to you and your perfect existence. And she runs away in one of the most iconic runs of all time.
You
And
guys
good
love
for her.
a good horror run.
Epic. And every single time I think of the Scary Movie joke they made for Run, but it was a totally justified run. Bill, that was out of line. That was a weird thing for you to say, and she ain't having it. Also, what an eloquent way to say something like that. I'm sorry if my traumatized life is an inconvenience. I couldn't even imagine saying something
Senior.
like that as
She's a senior in high school.
Yeah.
Kidding? Wow, she's
She's
eloquent.
elevated. Elevated.
Indeed.
She's eloquent and elevated.
Nev. Go Nev.
But also, I'm glad that in the conversation that we see with Billy, Sydney is saying, like, this shit ain't the same, bro. My mom is in the fucking ground and you can still see yours.
Yeah.
So
it's very Real Housewives of New York this season. You know what I mean? Like my story, your story, whose is worse, and
whose is worse?
Who has a worse scenario? I think we can all agree is Sydney in this. You know, stop trying to make a false, what do they call that? Like equalization or a false comparison or something.
Yeah.
It ain't the same. Then we go to, I think, which is a great scene, the movie store scene. Now, the principal gets killed in between. Henry Winkler.
Principal
R.I.P.
Fun.
He gets gutted.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
unfortunate.
In between. But not much to say there other than he gets killed. Then they go to the movie store scene, and I love this scene between Jamie Kennedy, and he starts to lay down like what the rules are. Everyone's a suspect, and you know, who's a red herring, and obviously the dad's a red herring, and like motives are incidental. It's just like it's a really good scene. Also set in a movie store, which we still had in the 90s, which, you know, it's just, I love a movie store, like a West Coast Video.
No, it totally is. And it's totally setting up like Billy as a kook. Like he is really creepy in this scene. And also we get a lot of like Stu's personality in this scene. Like he's so like exuberant and like over the top. When Randy's like, I think it was Billy. He's like, oh really? Then why'd the cops let him go? Like everything he does is so over the top, and it's like no wonder he was in Scooby Doo. He has like such an unbelievable, like excited, like personality. Everything he says is like full of like charisma. Wow.
Yeah.
Get it. You know?
Yeah.
I totally get it.
And also, it's this is the setup. This is Jamie Kennedy's moment to shine in this movie. He's telling us every single thing, every trope, every question, every whatever. Randy is the person that we go to hear about all of those historical things in movies and about the nerdy shit. And this is why I'm like,
it's Randy. You're thinking it's Randy at that point.
So
Like,
excitable.
See, the police are always off track with this shit. If they'd watch prom night, they'd save time. There's a formula to it. A very simple formula. Everybody's a suspect.
Like he's like so over the top in the scene, and I'm like, yo.
Yeah, and then he also at that point makes a reference to like, hey, could I date Sid or something like that? Like if you go back to jail or something to that effect. So then you're like, well, we got motive. Like he wants Sydney. He's obsessed with horror movies. Like, and so you're like, oh, it's obviously Randy.
everyone's a suspect.
It's a game of Clue. It really is a game of Clue. It's crazy. So yeah, so school shut down. Stu's like, let's party at my house. Dummy, dums. They all agree, and the whole town shuts down. We get like the first little tip of the Red Right Hand by Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds, which is like the quintessential like theme song of the whole movie. We see Dewey talking to the chief of police, and we find out that the calls made to Sydney are listed to Neil Prescott. Nobody's questioning that. Nobody's like, well, maybe somebody could. They're like, oh, wow, yeah, he's probably gone crazy from his wife dying. Nobody really thinks much of it, which that's a little weird. Regardless, Dewey drops Sydney and his sister Tatum off at Stu's for this epic house party. And I kind of thought it was
Dewey's just like, all right, well, be safe.
Don't have too much fun. You're the cops.
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Meanwhile,
gross.
he's just been dropping hints to Gail, who's clearly flirting with him, and he's spilling all the beans. So she's collecting data,
Yeah.
and we're gonna see that play out too.
So yeah, so she asks Dewey to accompany him inside the house to see what's what. She places very secretively a little camera inside the home like video entertainment center to kind of record them and secretly without their knowledge, and she kind of skedaddles away. And in the midst of that, Stu asks Tatum to go grab him a beer. So she inexplicably goes out to the garage by herself. I wouldn't even be going to the bathroom by myself, let alone walking into a garage by my lonesome. But she do.
Yeah, I think like I know that when I'm scared, I do feel safety in numbers. And so maybe she's like, I'm at a party and like
Yeah.
I'm just like right there in the other room. By the way, had I had a bottle of beer in my refrigerator, I was gonna bring that as my prop tonight because iconic of her like carrying all the beer bottles. And then of course Ghostface comes in. She thinks it's Stu. She's like, all right, hilarious, you're so funny. This is one of the more memorable. Again, she fights like an absolute badass until the end, but this is one of the more memorable deaths of any horror movie ever, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Big time, big time, big time. This is
Yeah.
the one I would want the least because it's kind of embarrassing. Like she goes to crawl away from him and she goes through like the kitty door
Yeah.
because he has shut the garage door, and he cleverly lifts it so that her body gets stuck between the mechanisms so that her body is crushed basically. And
Over.
it's just like so that her body is just like hanging like
It
limply.
was like, ooh, like shocking.
The death scene here it's not as iconic as Drew in the first scene, but I think it's just enough. It's a spotlight on Rose. It's a little stupid, going through the cat door. We get a little preview of that with the cat running out. I didn't even know a head could bend that way. If we're being honest, it's just it's a caricature, little bit, but the end scene of her just hanging from the garage door,
Sick. Gross.
sick. It's sick.
It's sad, and she was just such a like friend and such a like that was a sad one.
Yeah.
For sure.
Yeah, I was sad when she died, for sure.
Yeah.
But
Then
that skirt.
Oh, but that's her. But I mean, she died looking like a dime. So,
What more could we really ask for in this
I mean,
life? Right.
it's like there's worse ways to go out, I guess. Then we get to the video, and then they realize they're on the 30-second delay. And much like they go to the van, and Gail Weathers gets in, and she's like, "Oh my god, I got it in there." And then someone knocks on the door, and they realize, "Oh, we're on a 30-second delay." And much like the Jiffy Pop, like what a great effect! What a great effect! And you knew
Yeah.
that was going to come
There it
in
is. Yeah.
way later. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if it's then that's when Dewey like knocks on the thing and he's like, hey, I got a tip about a car found down the road. I was gonna go check it out. You want to come? And
Yes.
Gail's like, oh, yeah, absolutely. She goes to get her car and he's like, you know what? It's such a nice night. I thought we'd walk. And that's when you're like, is it you? It's such a weird scene.
I know. Exactly. I just love that Dewey's like, I'm going to shoot my shot, even though I'm trying to solve this murder. Like both
Mhm.
things can be true.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Never know what's what, but it was a weird moment to take that shot, Dewey, but hey, respect. So they kind of walk off, and then we cut back to the party. Billy shows up in his very creepy way. Hey, what's going on here? And Sydney and him decide to go upstairs and talk out their probs. They show like like blips of their conversation, but basically, oh, it's so sad because Nev Campbell has been so like, oh, strong this whole thing. Like, I'm sorry, my trauma is an inconvenience. And then they get upstairs to this bedroom and she's like, I'm the one who's been selfish and self-absorbed with all my traumatic stress. And she starts apologizing to his ass for not having sex with him. And it's so upsetting because it's like, girl, you were right. You were right. Billy was not being cool, and your gut was right all along.
I know. And it's such a like pivotal scene because again, watching it with today's lens, it's like, who amongst us, especially when we were kids, right? You get told you're crazy over and over and over again, you start to believe it, and it's like maybe I am just being difficult, or maybe I do need to just actually get over it. And you start to ignore your own like gut and instincts. And the juxtaposition of that and then the losing of the virginity, which as they intersperse this scene with the rules, is like, and the Halloween, like, playing on the TV that they're watching, like, oh, here's the tit scene, or, it was just masterful. Like, wasn't it masterful, that whole sequence? I
Yeah.
was like blown away.
Yeah. No, it's perfect. The way that they sequence everything is like, it's masterful.
Yeah.
And quite honestly, another amazing house. These kids.
Beautiful.
Beautiful.
Beautiful. You know what? You can rent this house on Airbnb, and it's exactly as it is in the movie, which a part of me is like, oh, but a part of me is like, oh, it would really be creepy.
Is it in Northern California, this Airbnb? Yeah.
Yeah. Like during like this time of year, they rent it out and they like deck it out as like, screamy.
My God, I need to do this this should have been my birthday this year. I could have just used him.
John, we know we're due for your 40th.
Seriously.
So then she says, like, as they're upstairs, like, making out, essentially, like, I can't keep lying to myself about who my mom was. And it's the point where she gets the realization that, and this was also, I thought, so interesting. You just assume that, like, they're talking shit about the mom the whole time or whatever, or that they've got the story wrong, because the picture of the mom looks like so 90s mom, like,
Yeah.
it's not like she was like Sharon Stone. She had that perm and like whatever.
Yeah.
It was the point where you realize, like, oh, well, just like the stories about her mom, maybe they are true. Maybe she was having all these affairs. And that's like messy, right? Like, it's like not this like, well, my mom was this perfect, like, like angel. And so then that also complicates, I think, her feelings and her realization, and makes her doubt herself and like, who am I? And I was her daughter and all these things. But I just like forgot about that part, kind of, that like, oh, she actually was just like banging around town. Maureen Prescott. As an aside, I would like to see the next Scream movie be Maureen Prescott's backstory, because bitch had a backstory. Like, what happened there? Like, how did she start sleeping around? Why did she start sleeping around, having affairs?
I say they touch on that a lot in Scream 3, but it's a little wild. Where they decide to take it, but they do touch on it for sure.
As people who watched all of the franchise, and a lot of people have a lot of things to say. For some reason, why they come at Scream 3 is beyond me, because I'm going to put it out there. Scream 3 is a great movie.
I loved that movie. Courtney Cox's bangs are absurd. Yes.
Oh, the short bag. Yes.
The shortest, like, unbelievable bangs. But I thought that movie was so good. I think it's a very good Scream.
I think I'm just going to have to keep watching them, like, now in tandem, because I remember Scream 2 was really good, too.
Yeah.
Right? Like, yeah, they're all good.
When she's in college, you were following her in your real life.
In my real life.
College.
Yeah.
Oh, my God.
Yeah.
So we're just going to have to do every Scream movie is going to have to be with Darrah. We'll do 1 through 8 or whatever they're up to now.
108 by the time you finish.
But Scream 3 for me was a delightful film, and for any haters out there, fuck off.
You're wrong.
Get back.
End of story.
Get wrecked.
Also during this sex scene, Billy references Silence of the Lambs. Like, again, how many times does he have to tell us who he is? And then says it's all a movie. And then they bone. And I'm thinking to myself, Sid, you're in danger, girl. Like, like Whoopi Goldberg and Ghost. Like, no, you got sex, you're screwed.
Them's the rules.
So then they go back and forth in between, right? And Jamie Kennedy is telling them the rules. Like, as she's losing her virginity, it's like, never have sex, right?
Right. Like he's like saying like never have sex, and then they cut to her like taking off
Yeah.
and like never drink, never do drugs. Like
never say I'll be right back. And then Stu goes, I'll be right back. And then he leaves. And they're upstairs and they're getting dressed post-coital. And she asks,
that's a very high end word when you say post-coital.
And she asks, who did you call in jail? Because again, now that she's seeing clearly, she's like, who'd you call from jail? And he's like, oh, I called my dad. And she's like, Dewey said he called your dad. And he's like, yeah, that's because I didn't get an answer. And she's like, uh-huh. And then he's like, what do I have to prove to you? How else could I prove to you I'm not the killer? In comes Ghostface, stabs Billy. And then you're like, shit, maybe it's not Billy.
This is the worst acting of Mr. Skeet Ulrich. Oh, it is the most like, I don't know. I don't know about a little unbelievable. But for poor Sydney, you're right. I do think those are questions she should have asked before they had sex. Those were some good questions.
Solid.
Like, as you're putting on your jacket, hey, by the way, who'd you call in jail? Like that. There were moments you could have asked those questions that would have been better, but that's okay. I can't imagine, like, just like the roller coaster her mind must be going through that. Like, she just had sex. She's questioning him. Ghostface pops in and kills him. Like, she just must be having a lot of thoughts.
Yeah, that's a tough day, you know. A tough couple of days for Sid. Tough couple of days. So Kenny is sitting there as all this is going on, and he's sitting there eating a bag of baked Tostitos. And I just want to bring you guys back because, like, baked chips aren't really like a big thing now, but like in the 90s, baked chips had like a real moment. And I was sitting there looking at him like, God, there could not be a more horrific snack than a baked Tostito. And like, I felt bad for Kenny that was his last meal, was baked.
Because Courtney made fun of his weight. How dare you, Gail?
She shamed him, and now he's eating baked chips for his last meal. Awful.
Poor Kenny. Justice for Ken.
Justice for Kenny, you know? So Kenny, I mean, not much to say here, but Kenny gets absolutely gutted. And, you know, R.I.P. God bless him. So after Billy gets stabbed, the kind of chase is on. So then we're going, right? She hops out of the window. She sees Tatum finally hanging in that kitten door.
And how is this the first time anybody has seen Tatum hanging outside of a
went out for a cig? No, he went out for a cig at any point? Like,
she's in that kitten door
for like an hour, seemingly. It's awful.
Poor Tatum.
All I know is that people still smoked in the 90s. The teens were smoking in the 90s. They weren't vaping, and somebody was out there having a cigarette and saw her. That much.
Thank you, historian, for that.
Fact checker. We missed the walk with Sydney and Dewey, and they roll into the bushes.
With Gail.
Makeout sesh, and they see Neil Prescott's car.
Gail.
Yeah.
Gail and Dewey.
Gail, yeah. Gail and Dewey.
I think you said Sid.
Oh,
which would have been a plot twist.
That would have been fun.
Yeah. They roll and they see Neil's car, and like, Dewey immediately is like, oh, what? Like, he realizes, like, the gravity of how serious that is, that they see that's Neil's car. And so they rush back to the party. Dewey goes inside to, like, check shit out, and Gail decides to jump ship because she sees blood on her car, and she jumps in her car, and that's when she, like, drives away, and Sydney jumps out in the middle of the road, and for some unfucking known reason, and Gail, like, quick twit, and she crashes the car, and she's unconscious. You assume dead, but never assume.
Yeah.
So Sydney, like, heads to the house to seek refuge when Dewey appears in the doorway, like, stabbed, and he, like, falls. She turns around, and Randy kind of comes out of nowhere, like, Sid, we gotta get the fuck out of here. I found Tatum's body. I think Stu did it. And then Stu comes out of nowhere, like, oh, he's lying. No, he did it. He did it. And Sid is like, fuck y'all. She grabs Dewey's gun from his holster and is like, yeah, fuck you. And she shuts the door on both of them.
Both. Or in the TV edited version, forget you both, which is a real big downgrade.
Get you.
Didn't have the same gravity.
Listen, we can't be edited for TV, just like Billy and Sydney's
we're not
relationship.
I know, how dreadful. Then Billy comes down the stairs. He wasn't dead.
Barreling down the stairs. Sydney, oh, like, he literally rolls down the stairs, and she goes to get him, and he's like, well, we need to get help. And she's like, no, we can't go out there. And he's like, no, it's okay. Give me the gun. She gives him the gun. So he opens the door, and Randy comes flying in. It's like, oh, Stu's gone mad. And that's when he, like, slowly turns and says, we all go a little mad sometimes.
Anthony Perkins, Psycho. Wow.
Watching movies, Bill. Oh,
I love you call him Bill.
Very dark, and we realize, dun, 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 Billy is the killer.
Right.
And that made me really
references
sad.
Carrie and the pig's blood, and you're thinking, it was him the whole time. Then, very quickly, you find out it's not just Billy, but dun dun dun, it's also Stu.
Hottie.
Matthew Lillard in the performance of a lifetime. And that's where your mind gets, again, this was like a different, like, I'm trying to remember. Usually it's one person. It's always one person, or, right?
My only thing too is the voice changer of it all.
Yeah.
The hello, surprise, Sydney.
Yeah.
Well, but also, like,
hot.
What reaction to have? You're going mad, Jeff.
That's pretty dark, buddy.
I
Pretty
think
dark.
I might
love
be.
Billy.
I think I'm going a little mad.
Pretty dark. It's because you're in the ghost face get up. Now you're seeing things the way they see things. Now things are getting a little muddled. Yeah.
Also, the iconic line that I loved is when she screams, fuck you, to him, and he says, we already played that game. You lost. And I was like, wow. Ice cold. It's cold.
Honestly, it's showing shades of The Craft a little bit. When she also says fuck off and he says nah.
He can play this character like nobody else. Maybe that's why I have such a crush on Steve Ulrich. He's the ungettable bad boy, mean McMeanie. He's so fucking mean. Again, all I keep thinking about is Sid's bad day. That could be a whole movie on its own. Sid's bad day. Like, losing your virginity, your boyfriend being killed, finding out that not only is he the killer, but he also killed your mom. Like, that was 2 hours. In a span of 2 hours, this gal has had it rough.
Yeah.
Honestly, sometimes I keep looking over and I say, Casey Becker's here at the end of the film. It's like, you know what?
I
If she
forgot, like,
showed
I
up,
forgot
that
some
would be
I didn't, like,
a
throw it.
motherfucking red herring.
Well,
Casey.
if her death had been a little bit more, like, please, like, but her death was rough. Like, or, like, and like,
It was real bad.
real bad. It
She was
wasn't like, if it was a slit throat, I could have done that.
Now that we're talking about Casey, I'm just going to throw this all the way back to the beginning of the film real quick. When she's going up to the porch and you see her parents getting up to the door, why couldn't you just throw the phone? Why couldn't you just make a
Well,
noise?
she could do a lot of things.
There's
Scream,
so many
anything,
things.
but I think she's in shock. I don't know. I have to imagine. Also, it makes for a good story. I don't know.
Yeah. No, when you were like, I like really like Casey, and you know what? I didn't like Casey.
There, you said it.
She
You said what you said.
This is very meta of Casey to say that she didn't like herself.
she's the most iconic character and the easiest one to do a Halloween costume by far. But like, girl, stop answering your phone. You call the popo. Put up some blinds. Like, she could have done so many things. Boo, boo, boo. She could have not stopped when she saw her parents coming. Like, she could have done like one after another things, and she
Could
was
have
just
turned off the burner on the
big time, big time. Take the Jiffy Pop off the stove. Like, she could have done so many things.
I did hear that in the filming, she actually did call 911 a couple times because they didn't turn off the phone or whatever, and the police showed up.
Oh no!
Yeah, IRL.
Yeah,
That's amazing. So then we get to what is like the culmination of the entire thing, which she says, "What's your motive?" Right? Like, and he says it's a lot scarier when there's no motive. But if you need one, how's this? Your mom was banging my dad, and my mom found out, and that's when she left. And so now you're like, okay, it's all coming together. Here we go. So this mama's boy, which she then calls him later, which was iconic. Like, that was iconic, you know. And when he says that, they flash to Stu, who makes a surprised face. He didn't know, did he?
He didn't know. I didn't really notice that until this last time I watched it, but I was like, Stu is really going off the like no motive, like wild thing.
Which makes
He had
Stu
no idea.
even more sick in the head than Billy. Because his buddy was just like, hey, let's go on a killing spree. It'll be fun. And he was like, cool, let's do it.
Yeah. There are like very different energies of like crazy. Like Billy is this like menacing. It said, and Stu is this like wild, like off the cuff, like kook.
Right.
And like they're both crazy, but like very different scales of crazy, like equal. But like Stu is this like unhinged like madness, and Billy is this like very controlled, like evil, like, oh god, what's the guy with the bug who killed all the girls?
Ted Bundy?
Oh my god. Boom. It's like a very Ted Bundy-esque, like very like charming and like likable.
I got a book for you to read. Okay, this is a total aside. I just finished the best book ever.
Tell the viewers.
Jessica Knowles, Bright Young Women, and it's a retelling of the Bundy murders from the women's perspective. Novel, so fictional, but real elements from the murders, the FSU murders, and all of that. And it basically turns the entire narrative on its head about that he was this like charming mastermind. He was like an imbecile, and the media made him out to be this like sexy, like, you know, Casanova, and it was like all bullshit, by the way.
Really?
It was
totally
sold 20 copies of this book because I'm making everyone I know read it. It was so good.
Wait, what's it called again?
Bright Young Women by Jessica Knoll.
Yep.
I will totally read that. No,
Yeah.
because I've watched a couple documentaries about it, and every documentary I've watched, it's been like more that he like needed help, like he had a cast, and like he was trying to get his books into his car, and not so
Exactly.
much that like he was this charming
He
guy.
trained on women being kind. Because
Kind.
women are kind, a lot of them, especially in 1970 something, whatever.
Yeah.
And it wasn't that he was like some suave Casanova. Like
Yeah.
it wasn't. He represented himself in court. He only got into law school because he falsified his records. He was a moron. So
Yeah.
it's just, and everyone's like, oh, he's so smart. And he was so, and it was, none of it was true. None of it was true. And so she writes this whole story to kind of change the narrative about who he was and about how the media like glorifies these serial killers, especially like back then, and made them stars, made them like
Totally see that. I could totally see that because like he was he was not handsome. I fucking hate it when anybody says that guy was good.
not handsome. No.
He was not good looking at all. He wasn't gross. He wasn't like,
Right.
oh, you got something to say? Cotton Weary?
That was the zaddy, not Ted Bundy.
You know what? I'm not going to be the one to say that Ted Bundy could get it, so I won't.
Please don't.
Seems like
I won't.
Seems like he did.
I don't know where you're...
So total aside, but yes, they did have different energies, different kinds of crazy.
Different kinds of psycho. Equal psycho, but like in a very different way. And like I prefer Stu's, to be perfectly honest. It seemed a little bit less menacing, but more like just like, what is this man going to say next? But yeah, they've like cornered her in the kitchen. They're telling her the whole tale that they killed her mom. They framed Cotton. It was simple. It was easy. And wait, we got a real scream for you. Just wait. And they go down and they pull up her father from the basement, who they have abducted, and he's tied and got the tape.
Like, we're gonna frame this guy, and we're gonna stab each other, and we'll pretend we were left for dead, but really just superficial wounds, and we get away with the whole thing.
But where they fuck up is that in the midst of doing their superficial wounds, fucking idiots, they don't do superficial wounds. They stab each other in the gut so deeply, and then they're pissed, and so they do it like menacingly, and they stab each other so deeply that they kind of start losing damage. Definitely on Stu's part. Stu's in trouble.
Yes, and during this, they reference the like, well, you got to have a sequel, and then they say movies don't make psychos; they make psychos more creative. And I thought that was like such a great line. Totally encapsulates the movie, because it's like, here it is. It's like the combination of like movies and this traumatic experience, and like who created what and how did they become the way that they did. Just like a great scene. Then we get to the final scene with Gail and the gun. So Kyryn, walk us through that.
So Billy tells Stu to grab the gun. He looks over, the gun's gone. He tells Billy, they kind of panic. They walk away from Nev, leaving her kind of just on her own, just these fucking imbeciles. And then, boom, who's there? Gail Weathers. Beep, beep, beep. And
Double.
She's got the gun she's got the gun pointed at them. Billy says, I thought she was dead. And Stu says, she looked dead, man. She still does.
Still delivering the one-liners, even as he's half dead.
It's one of my favorite lines. Like the comedic timing, just the energy to have that kind of dig when you are fucking dying. It's just like really special. She has the gun pointing at them, but Billy's like, oops, you forgot something. And then he fucking kicks her and takes the gun from her. He's like, safety's dead. Or safety, what is it? Safety wasn't on? Safety was on.
You should check the safety, or remember to check the safety, or something.
Remember to check, yeah. So she had the gun point, but the safety was on. So it was, where's this switch? I feel for her. I wouldn't know that ever. So he kicks her. He goes to shoot her. And Stu is watching on like admiringly. And just totally left Nev Campbell in the kitchen. But he turns around and he realizes that Sydney is gone, and so is Neil. So they go to like look for them, and they get a phone call, She's got the voice box, and she says,
Are you alone in the house?
Bitch! You bitch! Where the fuck are you?
Not so fast. We're gonna play a little game.
Billy puts her on the phone with Stu as he goes to look for her. And Stu says, did you really call the cops? And she says, you bet I did. He said, oh, my parents are going to be so pissed. Dog, you got
So
a lot
touching.
to worry about. Yeah.
It's touching. She says, what's your motive, Stu? And he says, peer pressure.
Yeah.
So sad. Sad.
I'm way
like,
too sensitive.
At the very least, Billy had like a stupid motive, but like a motive. But really, Stu had nothing. He had nothing.
He had
nothing. Just his friend said, let's do it. And he said, okay.
I also heard that when Skeet threw the phone at Matthew Lillard in that one part, he actually hurt him.
No
So
way.
his reaction, like, ow, you fucking hit me with the phone, dick, was like,
Real?
yeah.
That's funny.
It's so funny because, like, when I watched it, I was like, why did they leave that in? That was so unnecessary. So that's the case. That makes it a little bit funnier. So Billy goes to look for Sydney. He kind of like is looking. He hears the TV. He kind of looks in the closet. He thinks the noise is coming from the closet, and Sydney comes out in the Ghostface costume and stabs him with an umbrella. I don't know where she found a fucking knife umbrella that would stab him like that, but she do, and she stabs him. Pew! Yeah. And then Stu all of a sudden finds some kind of guts, and he gets up to come after her. They have a tete-a-tete in the living room, but she's able to fight him off, and then she pushes a television on top of him and electrocutes him. Very epic.
Yep.
She goes back to the hallway.
Then Billy pops back up, and Gail.
Yeah. So yeah, he
shoots
goes.
him.
Yeah. So Billy pops up to stab Sydney. Gail doesn't have the safety on this time. She shoots him
and delivers that iconic line. Remembered the safety this time, bastard.
Boom.
Then
Courtney.
Jamie Kennedy says, don't forget, the killer always comes back for one last time at the end. And then Billy jumps up, and then Sydney shoots him in the head, and she says, not in my movie.
Boom.
My job.
Incredible. And then the final scene is just Gail outside the house the next morning giving a live report with her fucking cuts on her forehead. Always business, baby. And you know, she's going to get a lot out of this occurrence. And
it just sets it up for, there's going to be sequels, right? They've already referenced it in the movie. They set it up and they don't tie it with like a bow. I mean, those killers are dead, but it's not like these people are fine. So you knew that there was going to be a continuation of the story. And it was just what a perfect little movie, right?
It was so delightful. I heard that they had it based as like a one-act play sort of thing. And even one of my pals, Doug, when I was watching it with him, he said in the first scene when we see Gail and she's in the neon, whatever, the cameraman has like story written on the back of his jacket, like in a succession of threes, which means it's supposed to be a trilogy. They always set it up to be this trilogy.
Okay.
And so yeah, we get that at the end. I fucking love Courtney Cox as like this news anchor-esque. Like she's just so fucking good.
So
confident.
Good. So good.
And I did read that she fought really hard for this part because they saw her as like Monica from Friends. They really didn't want to give it to her, and she was just like adamant. She was like, no, like I know I can do this part. Like she really wanted to branch out. I can't even imagine anybody else in that part. Like she was Gail Weathers.
Yeah, she was the perfect like mix of ambition and like tough, but then also smart and someone that we weren't supposed to like, but that you did like, right? That was
Yeah.
And honestly, seeing the Gale and Sydney togetherness at the end was real special too, because they were squaring off, they had words, they have this whole big fucking thing, and to see them, like save each other in a lot of different ways was cute,
yeah.
wholesome.
I just love a pro woman story, women coming together to get the big bads, It's just the best.
Oh, rare. Very rare.
Especially against two digheads. Am I right?
Yeah. Much like Ted
I
Bundy.
still have a crush on Billy.
Not that attractive. Not as attractive.
Very
or
Ted
smart as
Bundy.
you thought.
No. How dare you? Skeet is very attractive. He's no Ted. Ted is stupid. I hate that. I hate him. And anybody calls that guy attractive, I'm like, what are our references? Why are we doing this to ourselves? Was this, was the 70s, 80s that hard of a time? He was okay. You know what? I give him a 6. He's not somebody that would caress me into a corner. Like he was nothing.
No.
Skeet Ulrich.
No. I think I'm gonna get a Cotton Weary t-shirt.
I think you're gonna have to make it. I can't imagine no one's.
I gotta imagine there's I'm Team Cotton somewhere.
But also, who is naming their child Cotton?
I love that's on my name list. I love that. I love it for a girl.
Of course it is. Of course it is.
There was a bartender in Austin, and her name was Cotton, and I thought, oh my god, how cute. I don't know about a boy. That is really outlandish.
You know
but
what?
like for a girl, it's kind of
That's
cute.
something somebody down south would name their son, who owned a cotton farm or some shit. It's a very old Southern money
Weary. Yeah.
Well, you do know what they say: the touch, the feel of cotton,
There you go.
the fabric of our lives. That's what they say.
Is that what they say? Yeah.
Tale as old as time.
I think you're the only person in the history of time to make this stand on Cotton Weary, and I'm so grateful. I bet he is too.
Also, shout out Lieb. If you're out there, hit me up. I'm single and
ready to mingle.
Let's go into our lovely dovely ratings.
So here at Stoli Doli Scaries, we do our ratings by how many Stoli Dolis it would take you to enjoy the film that we are watching. And for me, I say 0. This is my highest rating ever. This is a movie I would watch with nothing and be ecstatic. It's perfect. It's spooky. It's 90s. It's a Scooby-Doo fest. I don't have much to say about that. So, what would you give it, Johnny?
I will go next. I would also give this film a 0. 0 Stoli Dolis to enjoy because it's that good. I mean, how could you not love a murder mystery with iconic scenes and iconic characters and the meta-ness of it all and the scenery, these houses, everything is so good. I'm willing to say it is my second favorite horror movie of all time.
Wow, me too.
High
praise.
Very.
It's I would also agree. 0 Stoli Dolis. Could watch it just raw dog, with nothing, and and just enjoy every moment as I did in high school. But it was just a perfect movie written, and I forgot Kevin Williamson actually wrote it, and he was the Dawson's Creek writer, right? That was what his thing was.
Dawson's Creek. He did.
I know he did last.
I know he did last summer.
Teaching Miss Tingle. He did so many movies, big movies in the 90s, early 2000s. It was him. He was the one.
It was just a perfect movie. It was great. It hit on all cylinders. It was so of the moment, of the time, but it was so ahead of its time in so many ways. And rewatching it, sometimes you rewatch things and you're like, eh. The rewatch was just as good as, the first time. I thought it was just perfect. Loved it. Loved it.
Perfect. Thank you everybody so much for joining us. We love talking to you. If you enjoy our videos, please like, please subscribe. It means everything to us. Until next time.
Remember the safety.
Yes.